Welcome to the Global Missions Podcast, a show for Christ followers who want to participate more effectively in God's work, both at home and to the ends of the earth. Visit us at globalmissionspodcast.com to find show notes, resources, and previous episodes. And now, here's your host, Rob Magwood, better known to many friends as Mags.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 5 of the Global Missions Podcast. We are really excited to be back. We've been planning and preparing for this. We want to say thank you to those who filled out the listener survey. We had respondents from several continents, North and South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Australia. So a big shout out to all our listeners around the globe. Thanks for taking time to let us know what you appreciate and how we can improve. We've read every single comment and we are learning about how to make this as relevant as possible to you, our listeners. The feedback from the survey was very encouraging to our team as well. We're glad to hear that it's of use to missions committees and lay leaders and pastors. We're thrilled that you're benefiting from this program. If you would help us share the word, one of the best ways you can do that is by leaving a review in iTunes or whatever other app you use. That helps boost the visibility of this so that others will find it. So thanks for taking just a couple of minutes to leave us a review in your podcast app. We are so excited about this new season and the conversations that we have planned, beginning with today's interview with Lukas Ruegger of Steiger Ministries. Over the years, we've had several episodes about respectfully reaching out to different groups of people, including Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, and indigenous peoples. Today, we're going to look through a slightly different lens at a demographic. We're going to look at youth culture. We're going to talk about what secular youth culture looks like these days and some principles for engaging this group. Our guest today is Lukas Ruegger, who is originally from Switzerland and who now has served as a mission worker with Steiger International in Beirut, Lebanon. He's been there for several years with his family, and he leads a combined team of both Lebanese believers and foreign mission workers. And they are reaching young intellectuals in that area. They use apologetic discussion events and street evangelism and a weekly Bible study in a cafe. They also run social media campaigns across the Arab world to proclaim the gospel. And Lukas is married to Denise. They have 3 kids. Lukas, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I am really looking forward to this discussion. Lukas, we want to begin just with a simple introduction. How did you become involved with this Steiger ministry?
Yeah, so basically around 10 years ago, when my wife and I were studying theology or missiology in the UK, we got to know a guy who was working with Steiger as a drummer in one of their evangelistic bands called No Longer Music. And that's through that personal connection, that's how we got involved.
Today's conversation with Lukas will bring out several examples from his ministry with Steiger and some of the different ways they are engaging secular youth culture. Lukas, let's begin with a definition. When we use this idea or this term, secular youth culture, what do we mean?
We mean that there is a phenomenon in our time which is happening, that young people across the world, especially in urban centers, are looking more and more alike, and they're thinking more and more alike. And so what we see happening, or what we believe to be discerning, is that young people, again, across the world, be they in Tokyo, Sao Paulo, a place like Baghdad or London, they have much more in common than these young people actually have in common with the parents or grandparents in their own country. They're exposed to the same ideas on media, they follow the same stars on Twitter and watch the same debates or same music videos on YouTube. And so this creates this one big global youth culture of, again, a whole generation sharing similar thoughts and, again, being exposed to the same ideas.
Mm-hmm. Well, you used it there. I was going to ask if we could put the word global in there. We really have a global youth culture, which is secular, because youth across the world are connected by this thing, especially the internet. It's been a game changer, really.
Sure. For example, in the Bible study we run, there is one guy who, basically follows American politics and Canadian politics. He couldn't care about like Middle Eastern politics, but again, what he is interested in is what is happening in the West. And then again, like people listen to the same music as in Beirut as the people I know do here in Switzerland, or as people do in the United States. Again, the internet has certainly been a game changer for sure.
Sure. Well, that's a nice transition. If we zoom in geographically, just for an example of youth culture, what does this youth culture look like in Beirut? Describe it for us.
Yeah, I mean, our people, or the young intellectuals we're reaching, again, they're super familiar with like trends and speakers that are known everywhere. For example, a lot of our people, they're talking about Jordan Peterson, who is obviously like a big guy on the internet or on YouTube at the moment. There is a lot of conversation happening in our discussions about the LGBTQ movement and feminism and all the stuff that you hear about in the West too. So yeah, that's really what's happening.
And are they wrestling with these things in Arabic, or are they reading and understanding, listening to English? What languages are part of this?
That's a very good question. Our people, they are actually more at home in the English language than they are in the Arabic language. I mean, I've had a girl from Damascus who is doing her master's in English literature at the American University of Beirut say that like her Arabic, I mean, she literally says her Arabic is rubbish. She can't speak Arabic, and her English, on the other hand, is perfect. And so it's really, Ravi Zacharias once said that changes in language often reflect changes in culture. And that's really what's happening in Beirut. You have people wanting to express their dissatisfaction with traditional Arab culture by way of speaking English. And I've had people tell me that, yes, I speak English because I want to distance myself from Arab society and Arab roots. I mean, they make that explicit even. So our Bible study runs in English. Our people say, no, we don't want to read the Bible in Arabic. We'd rather read it in English.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Bible study is one thing you've mentioned. What are some of the ways that your team in particular is engaging these young intellectuals in Beirut?
Yeah, we have a couple of activities. We run, as you mentioned, a social media campaign which reaches young people across the region from Algeria to Saudi Arabia. Then we do simple street evangelism where a team goes out and just engages people, praying for them, asking questions, trying to draw them into an evangelistic conversation. We have, in cooperation or connection with an atheist club, regular discussion nights, which are very apologetic in nature. And this really serves for us as a kind of channel, or as a vessel, a tool to draw in people to the Bible study. Like our discussion nights are very philosophical. Is there moral right and wrong? Is there heaven and hell? Or why does the universe exist? And so you draw these thinkers and these intellectual people and youth who are open to these sort of questions anyway. And then in the conversation or discussion, you recognize, okay, who is actually open to get to know more about the gospel. And then we invite those guys into the Bible study, which happens weekly at the cafe. And that's really the focal point. Now, a year ago, we were reading through Luke, and I think it's chapter 11, where Jesus says, like any father, if his son asks him for a piece of bread, like will not give him a stone, or will give him actually the piece of bread. So how much more will your Father in heaven give you the Holy Spirit if you ask him for? And then people ask, like I had a Muslim girl saying, I'd like to have the Holy Spirit, so I guess I'll just ask. And then, we had a whole conversation about that. And out of that, we started like low-key worship and prayer nights in our living room, which are kind of a casual or a low-key church service. And we do these regularly now, once a month. And again, they are attended mostly by non-believers. And the key element there is like an hour of people being prayed for. People can take their seat or sit on a chair, and then our team gathers around them to pray for them, and people love it. They say, well, I need this. I need to come to your place to be prayed for.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, what an exciting snapshot you've given us. I know there will be challenges in this ministry too, but really exciting to hear how the Lord is opening doors for you and has placed you and your family to help there. We want to turn our attention to some principles as well so that we can learn together with you. You've told us about three main ideas. What's the first principle you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think the first thing to keep in mind or to focus on if you want to reach young people is you need to know who they are. You need to get to know them. And that means you need to get to know them in the places where they live and move about and where they are. So practically speaking, I have one guy on my team who does his like office work in a shared office space.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just opens up great opportunities for him to get to know people. For example, he had this other guy just walking up to him. So yeah, they started having a conversation. My team member then invited him to like a community lunch we have every week. And so then this guy started joining the Bible study, and he just really tasted, I guess, our community, and he felt the love. He was actually homosexual. He once said, he came up to me later on and said, "Hey, Lucas, ever since I shook hands with you for the first time, I knew that I want to kind of share this thing with you." And so, yeah, it's really knowing people, getting to know them where they are, being a listener, listen to people's stories, listen to what they've gone through, and really trying to understand them. I think that's key. That's the basis of everything.
Mm. You know, getting to know people personally, it's going to be a principle in missions worldwide, but you're reminding us that we just really need to be close in person, knowing people.
Yeah.
I want to ask you how this fits with the social media campaign that you mentioned, because social media at times has been critiqued for actually being it's a type of relationship, but it's not in person. How do those two pieces fit together in your context?
Yeah, it's good you're mentioning that, because I mean, we got involved in social media in our ministry because we just felt, well, that's a great tool just to, throw the seeds out there. In Beirut or in Lebanon or in the Middle East in general, people are constantly on Facebook and Instagram. For us as a ministry, our goal is always plugging people into an on-the-ground community. There are different ministries who just do like online evangelism or online discipleship or theology by extension, and that has its place too. But for us, I feel, well, I really want to plug people into real-life communities of Christ followers. And so, yeah, I mean, the principle of knowing people still applies, because if you put up a post, the way you write your caption, your humor, the themes you're going to pick up, they need to resonate with people in order for them to watch your material or to follow your page.
Right.
And unless you know your crowd, you won't be able to put up stuff that will actually draw them out,
Yeah, it really is the foundation. You need to know the audience. So that's the first principle, very rich. Know your audience and go to where they are at. Don't ask them so much to come to you as go out to them, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, when we pioneered this ministry, what I did in the beginning, I mean, we didn't have any people. We did our Arabic studies for 1.5 years. And then we said, my wife and I were by ourselves. We didn't have our team. So we said, well, now we want to start and reach people. And the way we did that, we would just go to events, to workshops, to quiz nights. Like quiz nights are big in Beirut. There's a very thriving poetry and storytelling scene. So we would just go there and, sit next to people and start up conversations. I met this girl from Damascus, who is a regular member of our Bible study. Now, I met her at the quiz night.
What is a quiz night?
Maybe there's another word. You guys use another word.
Maybe trivia.
Yes, trivia, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, very cool. That was Steve, by the way, our producer in the background.
So I sat next to this girl. She's a veiled Muslim girl from Damascus. We started talking, and then we connected on Facebook, and a bit later, or actually quite a couple of months later, I felt that I should meet her again and pray for her. And I wrote her a message saying, we met back then at the trivia night, and I feel like I wrote her a message saying, this is going to sound strange to you, but I think we should meet. And I feel like I would like to pray for you. And she said, well, yeah, sure. And we met. She shared her story with me. She's got quite a very tough story in terms of family and just what she went through. And then I prayed for her, and she just started crying like a baby. And 3 days later, she was in our Bible study. Yeah, and she still is.
Wonderful to see good fruit from the exercise of this principle, getting to know your audience and going to where they're at. Okay, we got to press on to the second principle. What's the second principle of reaching a secular youth culture?
Yeah, the second principle is pretty straightforward. I'd say it's proclaim the truth, like proclaim the gospel, proclaim the cross, be clear in your message, don't compromise. Paul says, that the cross is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. And we need to put the message out there. You obviously want to be relevant. You want to use the language and illustrations and symbols that people kind of understand. Obviously, you want to be careful not to use church language and that sort of thing. But nevertheless, you want to be clear about the message. And
this is so helpful. This is such a great reminder, because I think even here, and I'm speaking for Canada and maybe for some of North America, we understand the relationship part, and we can even build relationships. We can know our audience and go to where they're at. But this second principle, if we don't proclaim the truth, we're just nice people and we can be friendly people. Yeah. But we're not bringing the Christian message.
That's right. And we in Steiger are very strong on that. Like, I don't subscribe to, just be a loving and holy Christian and people will start to ask questions. Now, sure, I always say that, living in holiness and love for the neighbor is key. And it's key for your environment to start to ask questions and that sort of thing. But it doesn't make proclamation obsolete. It's just it puts the right context or the right foundation for proclamation, but proclamation is still very much needed.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if there's an example you can just give us. How do you get that truth out to some of these youth in the apologetics group, or a Bible study is coming from the Word, but how are you working to get the truth out?
Yeah, in those apologetic discussion nights, generally or very basically, people know when they come to our living room. Normally we have between 25 and 30 people coming from all sorts of backgrounds, like Sunni Muslim, Shiites, Druze, or Buddhists, or whatnot, New Agers. They know, well, when we go to Lucas's place or to this guy's place, he's a serious follower of Jesus. So, and I make a point because there are always new people, like I tell people, well, this has come out of a Bible study connecting with an atheist club, and I lead this Bible study, and like here we are together discussing this stuff. And then in the discussion nights themselves, there's always more than enough opportunities to bring in the Christian worldview. There's, again, all these philosophical topics we discuss, they are like stepping stones for us to proclaim the Christian truth, or the truth of Christ. So it's really not that hard.
Mm-hmm. Excellent encouragement to us. In just a moment, I'm going to ask Lukas to share the third principle. The first is know your audience and go to where they're at. The second is clearly proclaim the truth. Just before I ask him that next question, we'd like to share with you this mission resource that we hope will be helpful to you and your church.
Would you like to learn more about missions? Perspectives is a dynamic 15-week course where you'll learn more about God's global purpose and how He's at work in the world. You can hear more about Perspectives right here on the Global Missions Podcast by listening to episode 14 with Wayne Matthews. Go to perspectives.org or perspectivescanada.org to find a course near you. And now, back to today's conversation.
We're back with Lukas Ruegger of Steiger Ministries, who has shared two principles for engaging secular youth culture. Know your audience and go to where they're at. And number two, clearly proclaim the truth. Lukas, what's the third principle?
The third principle is to invite people into an experience of authentic Christian loving community.
Okay. So inviting them in, what does it look like?
Yeah. So you really want people to have to have an opportunity to just to feel and to experience for themselves, okay, how does it look like when Christians are together, or when I'm under like a community that is led by Christians? So for like, to give you an example, which I think is quite amazing how God has worked in our ministries. Once we had a guy, when we were at one of our Thursday night Bible studies, we had a guy like passing by us, and he was just sitting in a cafe. He was walking to the restroom, and then this is how he tells the story. He said, "Well, when I passed by you guys, I just sensed a certain electricity, or there was a certain vibe in your group. And so I went to the bathroom and I knew I have to talk to these guys." And so that's Hassan. He was a hardcore like atheist really when I got to know him. He came back from the restroom and said, "Hey, are you guys some sort of literature club or so?" And then one of my people said, "Well, yeah, we kind of are. We just read the Bible." And he was shocked. He said, "Oh, wow, I'm an atheist, but can I join you guys?" And I said, "Sure, take my number." And then a couple of days later, we met. And again, when I got to know him, he was just like, you could sense just the hardness of heart and the aggression and the bitterness, really. Anyways, he became a member of our Bible study. He still is. And then he was the guy who started off this other atheist club sometime later with another guy, with a guy called Elias. And I joined them for one of their meetings. And the main leader, again, called Elias, and we hit it off really well. We connected really well. We had several coffees. And then out of that relationship, we started off with our discussion nights, which was the initiative of bringing our two groups together, his atheist intellectual club and our Bible study. Now, at that evening, or the initial first evening, the topic was, is religion still relevant in the 21st century? Elias and I decided to go for something generic, for something, just that would invite everyone into the conversation. And so our living room got filled up with, again, 25 to 30 people. I welcomed everyone, explained how I want this to happen. I was the moderator. I introduced the whole thing and said, "Okay, guys, the floor is open. Whoever wants to start off, please go ahead." And then Hassan, he raised his hand and says, "Okay, I want to start off." So he's the co-leader of the atheist club, okay? And also part of our Bible study. He says, "I want to say this to you guys. I was born a Muslim. I was raised a Muslim, but I couldn't care less about Islam. And you guys know that. I couldn't care less. I'm an atheist. But here's what I have to say to you guys. Ever since I met Lukas and his group, and ever since I experienced how these guys have welcomed me, accepted me, and loved me, and how they do that with like amongst themselves and with others, I am forced," and he said, "I am forced to conclude that Christianity is in fact extremely relevant." And so this is how the first discussion I started off. I had an atheist making our case. Yeah. So
it's incredible.
Yeah, it's extremely encouraging. And so we have people again and again, it's like experience or just hanging out with you guys, even though they may be, really far from the faith, or like having a tough time believing in God. They say, hanging out with you guys is just life-changing. So this guy, Hassan, he would sometimes stand up in the cafe and invite others to join us, just random people, and say, "Well, you guys need to join. This will change your life." So yeah, we have, and then also in practical ways, we have, as I shared, we have one community lunch once a week. And again, it's just, inviting people into table fellowship is a great way just for them to be exposed to, to Christian love. And this is what this principle is about.
Well, this is so encouraging to hear how the Lord has opened doors and remarkably used your example of community to work so powerfully. Such a positive example. Yeah. In a minute, we'll need to wrap up. I've got that last question I want to ask you, but first, it sounds like everything's rolling forward through this ministry. Just share with us what are some of the challenges, or one of the challenges that you have faced in this ministry? Because I'm sure it's not always everything coming together beautifully, like you've shared.
Yeah. two things is because of the history in Lebanon or in the Middle East in general, where like religion and politics have always been like very negatively intertwined. I mean, Lebanon has gone through a 15 years civil war where basically every religious fraction was fighting against everyone else, against each other. And so when you talk faith and Jesus and God to people, what they hear is politics and violence. So it really takes, time. And again, that's why it's so important to know people and to build trust, that they can actually hear you properly, and that they hear not just politics, but that they hear you speaking about a personal relationship with the creator of the universe and with Jesus who died for your sins. That's tough. And I don't see that challenge fading away anytime soon with the things that are happening in the region, like constantly happening in the region. So that's a tough one. And then, I mean, at the moment, just practically speaking, we're facing just logistical challenges in terms of, I mean, my living room just doesn't fit anymore with all the people we're reaching. Like the cafe we're meeting in is sometimes a bit, impractical to gather. We sometimes like 10 to 15 people is the general crowd we get on a Thursday night for the Bible study. So that it's challenging to have these conversations, in those kind of settings, and again, the limitations just in terms of space and stuff.
Sure. Wow, we would call those good problems to have.
Yeah, sure.
For the right reasons, right? Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, in a moment, I'm going to ask Lukas to share how any of you listeners in our audience could follow up with him. But we always try and ask this question toward the end of our interviews. Lukas, if you had the opportunity to stand in front of a group of pastors, the missions committee in a local church, well, what would you want to say to them?
Yeah, I guess I would go back to the first principle and encourage people to be out there, to find a way in which they can connect with young people in their city or in their environment. It's, we're called to love our neighbors, and, you can only love, someone once said, you can only love what you know. And also you can only know what you love. So I think, and I guess sometimes that's even where the problem lies. To be honest, when I came home from Bible study, I knew that I wanted to be out there and proclaim the word and do evangelism and stuff. But really, when I was honest to myself, I realized, well, I think I just lack the love. I want to do this thing, proclaim the gospel, but like, do I really have the love for the lost? And so I just started praying this very simple prayer: Lord, give me your love for the people, break my heart for those around me. And it's a prayer I need to pray again and again. And so, I would just advise you guys to, find a way to be out there, to get to know people. For some, this may just mean, bring cookies over to your neighbor on Sunday morning, or help them, with practical work in the house, or moving, or with homework with the kids. Just find a way to connect and to get to know these people. And as you get to know people, you will find that your love for them will increase, and the Lord will use that just to connect you with them from heart to heart. Mm-hmm. And I think that's how the Lord helps us to grow in love.
Well, it's a great reminder for us. And it sounds to me like those principles, you don't need to be anywhere near a faraway mission field for those principles to be very healthy. So these three ideas that we want to get to know our audience and go to where they are, clearly proclaim the gospel truth, and then invite them into the experience of authentic, caring Christian community. Great principles. Lukas, I wonder if you would just share with us any prime resources you would recommend for our listeners who might want to learn more about engaging secular youth culture.
Yeah, I mean, some of the books which I have found really helpful are True for You, But Not True for Me by Paul Copan. It's a very simple book that picks up some key apologetic questions. There's also Finding Truth by Nancy Pearcey, or again, a very good book by William Lane Craig, On Guard. This is just standard apologetic stuff, but easily accessible. But then also because I guess our ministry is really built on the two pillars of apologetics and community building. And so these are the apologetics resources. And for community building, two books that are inspirational are Life Together, of course, by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And there is a book called The Benedict Option by a guy called Rob Dreher, I think, if I pronounce that correctly. He's kind of picking up the monastic lifestyle as a way to engage secular culture. And I found this very inspirational, just the principle he lays out, what it means to be Christian community in a culture that is increasingly lost.
Super. Thank you. We will include all of these in the show notes, and you can click and find some of these things. Lukas, if our listeners would like to follow up with you or contact you in some way, how could they do that?
Yeah, the easiest way to do that is through email. So my email is lucas@steiger.org, Lucas with a K. Yeah, that's it.
Super. We will include that in the show notes if you'd like to follow up with Lukas or ask any other questions. If you'd like to learn more about Steiger Ministries, very exciting ministry. May the Lord bless you, Lukas, as you continue on. First, your time, what you're doing right now.
Thank you, Max.
And then as the Lord takes you back to Beirut. Thanks so much for being part of this podcast today.
Thank you, Max. Really enjoyed it.
Wow. I really enjoyed this conversation with Lukas. I was challenged and encouraged, but not just about what he's doing. I was challenged in my own personal ministry about reaching out to my own neighbors and friends nearby. This episode of the Global Missions Podcast has been brought to you by the Global Missions Toolbox and produced by Send International in collaboration with other like-minded agencies. On behalf of our team, thanks for listening, and we invite you to join us again in 2 weeks when we'll continue to explore the grand adventure of being Christ's witnesses to the ends of the earth.